Welcome everybody to the webinar today, which is about portfolio careers. Quite unusual. My name is Mena Ruparel and I'm the Managing Director of Law CPD Solutions. I'm joined today by Rachel. Hi Rachel.
Hi there, hi everyone.
And Rachel is going to be talking to you about portfolio careers, and she's an expert in this area. I'm going to interject very little. I would say to people who are listening that there is a handout of the slides. So if you want to download the handout, you should see it in the panel that says handouts. If you want to ask questions, then by all means type a question into the question box. It won't immediately pop up on everybody's screens. I'm going to wait for a moment at the end of the webinar, and then I'm going to put the questions to Rachel. And so don't worry about people seeing your name, because they won't see your name. So if you've got questions, do type them in. Don't worry if they're not answered immediately. We're going to take all the questions at the end. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Rachel. Over to you, Rachel.
Thank you. Thanks, Mena. Okay, everyone, so we're going to do a webinar for approximately an hour maximum, and it's all about portfolio careers. Do you ever sit in your office at work feeling a bit bored? It feels like the same old, same old. Well, with a portfolio career, that will never happen. And this quote to me really sort of sums up one of the great things about a portfolio career. Let your hook always be cast. In the pool where you least expect it, there will be a fish. Lots of possibilities with a portfolio career. So I'm going to run through the structure of this webinar. I'm going to start off in a few minutes talking about what a portfolio career is, because it's still quite a new concept, and also why they're growing. There's a number of different trends that are driving the growth of portfolio careers. And then Mena is going to share with you her own portfolio career that she's developed. And then I'm going to run through the sort of people who tend to be attracted to having a portfolio career, followed by some examples of different lawyers and what they're up to. So that might give you a few ideas for yours. And then very briefly, I'll run through my own portfolio career. And then we'll really get into the nuts and bolts of the how-tos. So how do you create a portfolio career? And importantly, what are the benefits? What are the downsides, the risks? And then I'm going to wrap up at the end with tips to market and manage the different multiple strands. And then finally, we'll do a summary and some sort of next steps. So what is a portfolio career? Most people in their work, they do one thing for one firm or one company, and a portfolio career is absolutely the opposite of that. So you can actually create it or design it exactly how you want it to be. It might be, for example, a combination of a part-time job, so you're employed, but only some of the time. You're doing some freelance work on a self-employed basis, perhaps a bit of pro bono volunteering, a non-exec directorship post, or maybe two. And then some people, they include studying and also travel as part of their portfolio career. So if you wanted to, you could work, say, 6 months doing a contract and then travel for 6 months, which is quite appealing. I don't know about you, I think that's quite appealing. And one of the great things about portfolio career is you can change it over time. So obviously different people have different life stages, whether it's they're having kids or being a carer for their parents or whatever it happens to be. Or perhaps, you just feel ready for something different, you want to go in a different direction, or perhaps the market changes. And I don't need to tell you how much the legal profession is experiencing a lot of disruption, and that is only set to continue. So more and more people are going to have portfolio careers, and you're in a really good position to be finding out about it now. And the good news is you don't have to have 100% legal work for your portfolio career. You can have a mixture of different types of work. So if you think about your transferable skills, although many people don't think about the transferable skills, so critical thinking, risk analysis, research, dealing with clients, etc., and being very organized, dealing with different things all at the same time. So lots of transferable skills that you can use in a non-legal context. And your portfolio career can be 100% paid work or a mixture of paid and volunteering. So why are they growing? There's some predictions that up to 50% of the population will be self-employed and have a portfolio career in 2020. And I'm not just talking about lawyers, it's a massive, massive shift in terms of the world of work. And a number of different trends are driving portfolio careers. So working mothers, they need flexibility, but actually men want it too. Data shows that there's no difference between the number of men and the number of women who actually would ideally like to work more flexibly than they do. And a portfolio career enables you to design your work as you want it, rather than how somebody else wants it, like your boss or your firm or employer. There's a huge amount of disruption and also more competition, so it's very important to take responsibility for your career and to make it happen yourself. And with a portfolio career, you really have to, because you're constantly monitoring it and changing it and evolving it. More and more people are getting fed up of working really long hours, and there's a real movement to wanting a better work-life balance. And technology and different aspects like that and more crowded roads are driving the need and the want to actually work more flexibly and have a better work-life balance. And also, if you think about what's been happening in the legal profession, so you've got companies like LOD, Obelisk, and all the other ones that are popping up, there's very much a move to flexible lawyers. Rather than pay someone to be on your books all the time, you bring them in as and when you need them, and that makes an awful lot of sense from the employer's point of view, but also from the client's point of view, and that is a massive growth trend. Especially if you get to a more senior level, there's a lot of competition for jobs and there aren't enough. So if you work on a freelance basis, then you can get enough work and also have all the benefits of freedom as well. And you may not be aware of this, or perhaps you are, but in the future there's going to be different specialist job sites. So imagine, say, 50 different lawyers on a website, the avatars, the images of the people's faces, and then descriptions of what they specialise in. And then there will be ratings by clients or peers about how good that person is. That is the future. It's quite scary, isn't it? I mean, compared to that, to how work is at the moment. So you need to make sure that you market yourself to be chosen for the projects that you want. So when you embark on a portfolio career, not only do you need to create it yourself, you need to market and manage it yourself, and more about that later. Another driver of portfolio careers is millennials. So millennials is a marketing term, and I know lawyers hate marketing terms, but basically it's employers who are under 30, and they have very different needs and wants from other generations. And they don't want to have a career ladder. They don't want to wait for years to become a partner or to get responsibility. They want to do different things. And many millennials, they aspire to be self-employed and to work abroad, for example. So for them, a portfolio career as a career choice is absolutely the norm. But they're not the only people who want it. Other people do too, and more about that in a minute. And then if you think about what's happening in terms of the world of work, so there's uncertainty with pensions, we're all going to be living longer, and in the past it would be 60, 65, that's it, stop work, retire, etc. So mature workers are wanting retirement to be delayed. Over to Mena, who's going to talk through her portfolio career.
Thanks, Rachel. Yes, I was saying to Rachel before we started the webinar that I hadn't intended to have a portfolio career. On the screen you can see all the various different things that I do that form part of my career, and in fact I, like many lawyers, had got to a point where I was a bit bored with a 9-to-5 Monday to Friday. In fact took a position that didn't really suit me, and so left without having anywhere to go, and thought, well, I'm a well-qualified solicitor, I'll do some locum work. And then as I started to do the locum work, I realised I really enjoyed the flexibility, and then started to look around and realised that there were other things that I could do alongside being a solicitor. So although I started off being a solicitor on a locum basis 80% of the time, in fact I now probably say that my work as a solicitor is 10 or 20% of the time, and the rest of the career is formed of mainly law-related things, but it's a very interesting career, and it means that I teach and do examination work as well as being a family solicitor, and in fact everything is quite complementary, although Rachel will go on to give you examples of people who have very different portfolio careers. Mine is mainly law related, but it just means that over a period of probably 12 or 15 years, I've gone from 80% law family solicitor work to 10 or 20% family solicitor work, and everything is really fulfilling, and it means that my career has developed in a direction that I want it to develop, and probably I don't think I'd be able to do half the things that I do now without having a portfolio career and without being self-employed. Back to you, Rachel.
Thanks, Mena. So who has a portfolio career? Well, people who are really entrepreneurial, who love trying different things, they love learning, etc. People who really need or want flexibility, so working mums is an obvious example. And I find with my clients, often they just love learning, they love variety, or they've got a creative streak. People say, oh, part of me wants to do this and part of me wants to do that. And it's really important for people to sort of develop that creative side, and having a portfolio career means that you can, even if it's just having time to kind of write or do drawings and things. And also I think people who really, they feel they want a sense of meaning and purpose and fulfilment in their career. We spend so much time at work, so that's a driver for them to create more interest. And I often find working with lawyers, often it's the atypical lawyers. So it's the real extroverts, or they just don't want to do drafting, etc. They want to do something different. They really do, and often they've fallen into the law because they were following their parents' footsteps, or it was teachers' recommendations. They just really want to do something different. As mentioned on a previous slide, so millennials who are under 30s, and also pre-retirees, so they don't want to retire yet, but they don't want to work really full on. So a portfolio career is ideal for them to, you know, keep a sense of belonging and employment, but pursue other interests as well. And then look at the legal aid cuts that's been happening in the legal profession. I mean, that's forcing people to really rethink and to do something different. So a portfolio career is a good opportunity for them. So here's some different examples of lawyers who have portfolio careers. In a nutshell, all these examples demonstrate that you don't just have to do 100% legal work. For some people, they have a hobby that turns into a business. For some people, it might happen by accident. So, for example, Eunice buys properties and does buy-to-let, and she's also an international legal consultant. Ben, he does freelance property lawyer, and he's a DJ, and that's the music as opposed to the legal version. And Hammond, for example, he does freelance legal work. He's fantastic with technology, so he does computer coaching with individuals, and he also works part-time as an operations assistant for a property company. So he's background is law, but he's using his skills in a different context in the operations assistant property company role, attention to detail, drafting documents, all that kind of thing. And Amy, she always had a burning desire to be a writer of novels, and she combines that with being an in-house employment lawyer. So I've been self-employed for 19 years. My goodness, I'm completely unemployable now, and my portfolio career has evolved a lot over that time. And that's a combination of me changing, markets changing, and I just love learning and variety. I spend a lot of time thinking and planning, so my career is very conscious in terms of what I do. So I do a lot of, I'm just going to take a sip of water. I've got a frog in my throat. So my portfolio career, I do a lot of career coaching of individuals, helping people to really understand who they are, what they want, and how to make it happen. And portfolio careers is a specialism. I've also done a lot of executive coaching in the past, not so much now, because I'm finding the people I'm attracting really want to have career fulfillment and become self-employed and make it happen themselves. I also do a lot of writing. I really love writing, and it's very kind of project-based, so I love learning a new topic and writing it and then getting it published, and it enables me to help more people and also to build thought leadership, which is increasingly important out there in the world of work. I do a lot of events, and that's another example of a project. I like projects. I would hate to do one thing all the time, even a 6-month contract. I would just hate it. So I do a lot of events, designing them, sourcing speakers, sometimes chairing them, and I do that for the Law Society, but also my own events. I also really enjoy small group workshops, so with about 20 people for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and sometimes longer, things like career strategy, and content creation and curation. So that's like creating e-courses and things for people to read and learn. My background's marketing, so I do a lot of marketing mentoring. Most people hate marketing themselves, and you really need to market yourself with a portfolio career, so I help them to feel comfortable about that. And also I do talent, career management, and diversity and inclusion mentoring. I really enjoy that. I wouldn't want to do a full-time thing with that, but on an hourly basis or a selective basis, supporting other people to get really good at those things. And recently I thought, you know what, I really want to set up my own network. I've done so much networking in my life, so I co-founded a new network in Oxfordshire where I live, and that is specifically for senior women in different professions and sectors. And we had our launch event in March in International Women's Week. So that's quite an eclectic mix, as you can see, but it's very stimulating. So in a nutshell, you need to ask yourself the question, is a portfolio career for you? And if you look at the different post-it notes on this slide, so balanced lifestyle, does that appeal? Positive attitude, challenge, it can be very challenging. A sense of purpose, thinking about your options, variety, and self-awareness. It's a very individual decision, but it's really worth exploring. So, practical how-tos. How do you create your portfolio career? I think a really important thing is to work out your financial break-even. Lawyers are taught to see the risks in things, and I find often with career change, lawyers go around in circles because they see the pitfalls and the downsides, and they can really tie themselves in knots. So a really practical thing to do is to work out your break-even, the costs that you need to cover every month, and therefore by working that out, you can see what you need to get in place to give yourself peace of mind. And it might be a couple of days freelance, a week or a month, and you know that you've got that covered. I would really recommend that you do that as a first step. Second step, I would say, is really understand your transferable skills. Most people aren't aware of what makes them great and what they're really good at, and that is absolutely essential with a portfolio career, because by knowing those things, you can work out what else you can do. And I've got a couple of free reports that you can do that, which I'll talk about at the end. I would also say, if you think about all the possible things that you could do in the world and all the meetings you could attend and interviews, you can completely lose your time. So one of the important things about a portfolio career is really understanding yourself inside out. What are your needs, your wants, values, i.e. what's important to you, what motivates you, what fears you have, what you don't want, and that gives you a framework to make a really clear, conscious decision about what you say yes to and what you say no to. Really, really important. It's also essential with a portfolio career to analyse your markets and also look at trends. Everything is changing so quickly at the moment, and it's very important to take a step back and look at what companies or employers are buying. And what they buy is not always what they need as well. So, you know, making time in your diary to look at that. And there's a lot of useful information now. Many of the big companies like McKinsey and Hay, etc., are publishing free reports. So it's not difficult to find information. It's just putting that dedicated time in your diary. And that'll give you a sense about where to focus and where to explore and where not to. Also, what makes you unique? So if you think about your skills, your knowledge, your approach, and also your experience, everyone is absolutely unique, and it's very important to work that out, and that can feed through into your personal brand as well. And ideally what you want is to become the go-to expert in more than one area. So going back to that concept of TripAdvisor type resourcing sites, imagine being an employer and thinking, right, I've got to gear up and source a team for this particular project. You need to make sure that you stand out on those sites so that they choose you rather than anybody else. So it's really important to build your specialisms, and that includes investing in your qualifications, your skills, etc. There's a really good book by a guy called Reid Hoffman, that's R-E-I-D Hoffman. He's one of the co-founders of LinkedIn, and he says that we all need to have a plan A, B and C for the uncertainty in the world, and that uncertainty is the new normal. One of the posts on my LinkedIn profile is about that topic if you want to find out more about that. It's very, very important. And you could actually say, well, Portfolio Careers does give you a plan A, B and C, because you're not just putting all your eggs in one basket. And finally on this slide, I would say really, really make sure that you invest in your career capital. What I mean by that is it's all the things that will help you to get work in the longer term rather than the short term. So that would include building up your network, thought leadership, winning awards, all those things that make you very marketable. Make that a priority. Other aspects of creating your portfolio career. Well, one of the great things about your portfolio career is that you design it for yourself to suit yourself. So for example, I wake up really early and I have a little afternoon nap in the afternoon, and I plan my day in that way. In addition to that, I plan it so that I work at home in the office on a Monday and a Friday. I'm always in London on a Wednesday, so you kind of create that structure. So thinking through what suits you, and that may be governed by your children and school holidays or whatever it happens to be. Or one of my clients, he does various different adventure competitions, and they're at certain times of the year. So he adjusts his working life around that. It's very different for different people. And I think often when you're thinking about embarking on a new career journey, one of the best things that you can do is talk to people who have a portfolio career, because then you can ask them lots of questions and, you know, what are the downsides, would you recommend it, useful resources, things like that. So that's a really good idea. And also build your network, because it's really through talking to people within your network that you uncover opportunities or new possibilities that might become new strands of your portfolio career. And also, I would say, begin where you are strongest. I often find that lawyers, they need to feel that they're really experienced and they feel very credible. So starting where you've got experience, then you can branch out from that over time. And it's very important to have targeted biogs. So if you've got, say, I don't know, 5 different strands to your portfolio career, you want to have individual biogs for each different specialism, because otherwise people feel quite confused. So it's very important that you sort of separate out the different bits of your portfolio career and you have one conversation about one thing with a particular person rather than talking about all of it, and have case studies to back up your credibility and experience for that particular focus. And finally, and I really can't emphasize this enough, invest time by monitoring what you're doing, adapting and pivoting if necessary or desired. In other words, change direction if you need to or if you want to. Gosh, I could spend a lot of time talking about the benefits. Freedom! It's just so wonderful having a portfolio career. You have autonomy, you avoid politics, it's very flexible, it's more fulfilling. You can absolutely design it to suit you rather than anybody else. You're always learning, and it's future-proof, and that is so important. So I love that slide. My goal is to build a life I don't need a vacation from. So what are the downsides of a portfolio career? Well, most people like putting human beings in a box, which really annoys me, I have to say, but that's human nature. So you don't fit in one neat box with a portfolio career. And it can be really full on. If you've got all of the strands of your portfolio career happening at once, it's like, oh my goodness. But that's where having good organised systems and support really, really helps. Another aspect in terms of a downside of a portfolio career is the uncertainty. I mean, we live in a very uncertain world, so if it's important for you to have an amount of certainty, work out what that is, and then make sure that you get that certainty, whether it's, you know, one day a week, you know you've got that money coming in, and then you worry less. It's absolutely essential to monitor trends and be very vigilant of the changes that are out there. So if you think about at the moment, all the jobs that have been lost in oil and gas, publishing is going through a real challenging time at the moment. And often, especially with technical type areas, your skills can become out of date quite quickly. So keeping an eye on things like that is a really important thing to do, even if it's every, say, quarter. And then you can make sure that you stay one step ahead and you're very marketable. You really have to be very self-reliant and resilient with a portfolio career. And I think it's the same of any form of self-employment, really. When I left employment 19 years ago, the only thing I really missed was the company car and the IT helpline. So I think you naturally need to be quite an independent person and to build really good support systems around you. It's still quite a new concept, and therefore there's a certain amount of educating people about what it means. And I found going to different networking events with lawyers, there's a real kind of like, ooh, that sounds really interesting. So I think there's a real appetite for it out there. It's just helping people to understand what it is. And there's lots of different names for portfolio careers as well, which I think is slightly confusing. Employers, are they really embracing portfolio careers? Well, I think the world of work is a bit stuck at the moment between the old ways and the new ways. So they're starting to understand it. I wrote a couple of articles for Managing Partner magazine, but it's definitely quite a new area, I would say. And going back to the key concept, well, people like putting you in a box. Sometimes people can kind of go, sorry, you do what? They feel a bit befuddled by the fact that you don't just do one thing, but it doesn't take long for them to understand the concept if you explain it to them. So how do you market multiple work strands? Well, a really simple thing that you can do, but it takes time to put it in place, is define your personal brand. So your personal brand is the territory that you want to occupy in the minds and hearts of your target audience. So mine is talent liberation, and it's basically like it's like an umbrella under which you hang different strands. And having a personal website can be quite useful as well, because it sort of puts everything together all in one place. It's very important to be targeted, as I mentioned earlier, so to have very specific biogs for the different things that you do and relevant examples, and also to use the right language, because every market or service has its own language, and it's very important to talk that language. I would also say really develop strong specialisms and use keywords so that you can really attract opportunities to you. LinkedIn is not really set up properly yet, although I'm sure it will be in the future, for portfolio careers. So in an ideal world, in terms of social media, you need to use specific keywords Google Keyword Planner is a good way to find what they are, but it's very difficult with LinkedIn to be single-minded. In addition, it's very important increasingly in the world of work to have testimonials. So going back to that thing about TripAdvisor type resourcing sites, if you think about Airbnb and TripAdvisor, there's those ratings, 5 stars. That is going to become the norm for resourcing sites. So therefore, give people testimonials and source testimonials, very genuine ones, because that is becoming more important. Make sure that you review trends regularly and block out time in your diary. And not just once a year. I would recommend that you do that at least 4 times a year, ideally. And really make a conscious choice to build, nurture and leverage your network. And we all need to have a close network and a very large and diverse online network for the future world of work. So even if you're thinking about perhaps creating a portfolio career in, say, 5 years' time, you can make a start now on really building up your network and tag your connections on LinkedIn and get it all set up. So in a nutshell, plan ahead now and build your career capital. So managing multiple strands. I'm naturally very organised, and it's really served me well in terms of having a portfolio career. So making time regularly to plan, structuring your day, your week, month and year. I personally go on 6 career retreats every year to really take stock, create, plan, refocus. And also go back to what I was saying earlier, invest time in really understanding yourself. There's lots of different personal development books and TED Talks and coaches, etc. So the more you really understand yourself, it'll help you to be very clear about what you choose to say yes to and no to. In addition, having good systems and IT, so it just makes such a difference. You don't lose things, you don't not find things. I mean, that's essential whether you're employed or self-employed. But I would say that's especially important with a portfolio career, so you've got everything to hand and you don't lose time. It's always good to have a financial cushion, because then if there's a credit crunch or something happens or one of your projects that you thought was going to happen doesn't, you've got a bit of a backup. And setting up a regular savings account as well to keep that topped up will enable you to cover yourself if perhaps you're ill for a few weeks or a few days, or also to invest in your own qualifications and skills, etc. I would really recommend getting a virtual PA. I can't emphasize how much they have been so useful. I've had one for 16 years, and you never wait in a customer care line not feeling cared for. You can delegate sourcing information, booking trains, networking events, and it frees you up to really focus on the other things that you really enjoy. I'm obviously biased because I am a coach, but having someone who is supportive and challenging and holds you accountable to achieving your goals is invaluable, and that is a massive growth area. And in this world of big data, having good systems to manage that overwhelming plethora of information is really key. So, for example, Hootsuite is a great setup for managing Twitter. So, in summary, portfolio careers are a growing trend, and some predictions are that up to half the workers will have a portfolio career by 2020. That's only 4 years away. You never ever get bored or stuck in a rut. It's incredibly stimulating. You're always learning, and that, I think, is fulfilling in itself. So it's not a conventional ladder, but it's a carousel that you step on, step off. It's always changing, and some people hate that, but actually it's really stimulating. And you can always edit it to suit, so it never becomes stale and boring and static. You can change it if you want to. It gives you adaptability for the uncertain world in which we live, and that is really important for peace of mind and to feel confident that you're going to create a secure future for yourself. It can be complex to manage and also to market, but it is stimulating, and it really does keep you on your toes. And I think one of the loveliest things is that you are your own boss. You've got that autonomy to do exactly what you want, and you sidestep all the politics and all the hassle and the sitting in traffic jams. And in a nutshell, a portfolio career is about more fulfilment and freedom, and you're just not on that hamster wheel anymore. So, practical what next? I would recommend as a priority, if you're interested in portfolio careers, is definitely make time to understand your transferable skills and also your attitude to risk. Just as you would explore your attitude to financial risk when thinking about investments or pensions, with a portfolio career you really need to understand how you feel about risk. So I find with my clients, some people need to have 2 years worth of money in the bank to take a step forward, and other people it's 2 weeks. So you need to know what your own definition of that attitude to risk is. I've got a questionnaire that I'm very happy to send you, and it's basically a self-scoring questionnaire where you can assess how suitable you are for having a portfolio career. If you're genuinely interested in developing one, I'm happy to spend 20 minutes in a no obligation telephone consultation. So get in touch if that's of interest to you. As I mentioned earlier, speaking with current portfolio careerists, so Mena is one, and there's many others out there. There's quite a few guest blogs that I've got on my website if you want to have a look at those. That really helps you to understand what it's like. And if you're interested in some support to create your own portfolio career, ask me about individual and also the group options that I've got. And what I would say, and this is a really important point for lawyers, because lawyers are risk averse. They're taught to be, it's got to be absolutely perfect because of the consequences of it not being perfect. Your portfolio career will never be absolutely perfect because it's always changing. So take a step and take an action, and then it all starts to happen and form into place.
That's fantastic. Thanks very much, Rachel. What we're going to do now is take some questions. So if I can encourage people to ask questions, we've got some questions pending. So now's the time to type your questions up and send them in. So Rachel, the first question is this. There seem to be fewer locum and freelance opportunities for litigators than those in non-contentious work. Any suggestions or examples? I imagine, first of all, Rachel, I don't know how much you keep an eye on things like those types of opportunities for lawyers.
I'm not a lawyer by background, so that's a technical question that I'm probably not the best person to answer.
Probably I can help with that, and in fact, I would say that I'm a family lawyer by trade, and people all year round ask me for locum opportunities. Certainly it used to be in the back of the Law Society Gazette you would get a number of opportunities for locums wanted. I think I'm registered with maybe 6 or 7 agencies, and I have been for years. I'm actually not looking for locum work at the moment because I've got more than enough on my plate, but I tend to find that there are quite a few. I also think, and Rachel, you might want to expand on this, you mentioned lawyers on demand, and it might be worthwhile at this stage setting out for people what lawyers on demand do, because I think they are aimed at litigators.
Yes,
Or they have a lot of litigators on board. So if you explain what that is.
Yeah, sure. So the easiest first step to begin a portfolio career is to change from being employed on a 5-day-a-week or 4-day-a-week basis to become freelance. So companies like Lawyers on Demand, LOD for short, or Obelisk, they have basically been set up to provide flexible freelance lawyers for clients. And Lawyers on Demand especially, they have got some very useful reports that you can download from their website free. And lawyers, the whole nature of being a lawyer is changing really, really a lot at the moment. And the reports that they've got are written by a guy called Jordan Furlong. He is a Canadian guy, and I think they're incredibly useful to read because they're all about the future lawyer roles rather than the current ones, because the nature of lawyers' work is changing because of technology, and it's really, really important for lawyers to understand what those changes are. And there's different specialist type roles popping up. So, for example, project managers, process roles. So if you're a bit fed up of doing pure law, you can pivot yourself and position yourself to do those emerging roles in the legal profession and start developing that area. So I'd really recommend that you have a look at the LOD website and download those reports.
In addition to that, Rachel, and I don't know whether or not you know the answer to this, Lawyers on Demand launched a new service. I think it was this week, didn't they? And they are, and I can't remember what it was called, or I don't know that much about it. Do you?
The name escapes me, but it's an online website, so a bit like I was describing the TripAdvisor type setup. I haven't had a look at it myself yet, but I would imagine that that's what it is. So
Yes.
It's basically individual freelancers marketing themselves and describing their specialism, and so therefore clients can go direct, and presumably LOD will get some sort of margin through that website.
Yes, and in fact I
can't remember the name, but is it Spoke, I think? It might be Spoke.
Spoke Law, that's
right.
And if you look at the website, so anybody who's interested in this type of thing, look at, as Rachel says, at the Lawyers on Demand website, look at spoke.law. It's a spin-off from Lawyers on Demand. I think they just launched. It's free to register yourself on there. I think they charge a fee if you get a job. So you can register yourself as a lawyer looking for work. Employers can register themselves free if they're looking for somebody, but it's almost as though if they needed somebody on a particular project, so let's say there was a litigation project ongoing for the person who's asked this question, and they needed somebody to help with a discovery stage, but they only needed you for 2 weeks, I think you set your fee with them. The website takes, I think, 7%, and then you go off, work for whoever it is. The contracts with the Spoke Law people, so they manage the contracts, they manage the introduction, they take 7%. But actually, I think you set your own daily rate. So you could say, well, I'm willing to do this for £400 a day, and then you could go off and work for a firm who just needs a sensible person to fill in for a daily rate. You pay Spoke, you get your money, they get their worker, and obviously the more work you do, as you say, Rachel, people will give you good ratings, good reviews, your name gets out there. And in fact, when I first started as a locum myself, I happened to be at court issuing something, met a solicitor who I had known for years. She mentioned that she might be looking for a locum. Did I know anyone? And I said, well, actually, I was just about to start doing locum work. And she said, great, send me your CV. And that was my first job. And I have to say, I've only got, in all these years, one job through a traditional agency.
The power of networking. I'd also add to that, Mena, that a lot of the larger law firms are setting up flexi-type offerings as part of their brands. So I don't know what kind of firms or companies the people on this webinar work with, but it's worth exploring if you're currently working for a large Magic Circle or a Silver Circle firm. You might be able to shift from being full-time to working as one of their flexi resource. And then that could be the first step towards you becoming completely independent and freelance, and then evolving your portfolio career with different strands.
It's also worth noting, Rachel, that it's a good idea when you're thinking about doing this to speak to an accountant as well. So speak to an accountant about things like offsetting some of your costs. So when you're working from home, you can offset some of your working from home costs against your turnover, your travel costs, and that's something that's always changing. So I would say that having a good accountant who understands the type of work you're doing, because if you were earning, let's say, £35,000 working for a company, you might think to yourself, well, I need to be turning over £60,000 because I need to net 35, and in fact you don't, because you can offset so many of your costs, telephone, working from home, etc., that actually, as you were saying earlier in the webinar, Rachel, understanding your attitude to risk, but also understanding your finances is really important. And over the years, my turnover and gross and net profits have changed, where I've pivoted, which is what you were talking about, where I've thought to myself, actually, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to take a turn. And actually, you find out that you don't need to turn over a huge amount in order to maintain the same lifestyle that you've had before. So having an accountant, understanding finances, understanding what you need, and having that attitude to risk is really important.
Yes, that's a really good point. So yeah, getting a good accountant, perhaps looking at getting a virtual PA, and also there's some really good cost-effective technology out there that can help you to manage your own portfolio career. So I use something called Free Agent, which is an online accounting type package, and my husband inputs all the information and I prepare it, and then the accountant gets that. And thinking back to when I set up my own business about 19 years ago, you can backdate, I think it's up to 6 months worth of expenses that you have put in place preparing to launch your business. So things like buying a computer, stationery, a printer.
Yeah.
So it's really worth keeping records now. Coffees and all that really adds up. And then when you do launch your self-employment portfolio career, you've got all that, and you can offset that to reduce the amount of tax you pay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that for those people who are thinking about going self-employed, understanding that is really important. I would also say you were saying that some of the people that you work with like to have a 2-year money cushion to work with. When I first started, because it wasn't really planned, it was a reaction to something that was happening in my career, I had remortgaged my property, taken out a small lump sum, and that was my cushion. And at the time, I was in my early 30s, and it was really worth it for me. It was worth having that financial cushion. Ultimately, I didn't even use a quarter of that money. It just kept me going until the locum work started coming in. I also started off by offering my services at a very much reduced rate, so that it was more attractive to hire me than somebody that was through an agency, because you weren't paying the agency fees. And so I'd started off, I think my rate was £75 and £75 a day cheaper than everybody else. And of course that really helped, because people were saying, oh, that's a great deal for me, we'll take you on.
Yes, that's a very good point, Mena. I think also I find, especially with lawyers, that they don't want to offer a service that they haven't got experience of, or a lot of experience. So to actually feel confident and to have conviction and authenticity in that. So to do maybe some volunteering for a friend's business, and then you can get a testimonial or a case study, and then that leads you to the next opportunity. And it really, really helps you to branch out into new areas that might be different to what you've done before, but they're the direction that you want to go.
It's worth noting that somebody I know who was an immigration lawyer took some time out to have children. When she came back, the immigration law had changed so much that she didn't want to go back. And so what she did was exactly that. She asked a friend of hers who works at a local authority if she could shadow. She did some free work shadowing for a week. When she got back, she thought, well, actually, I quite liked that certain area of law. She applied to her own local authority for a job that wasn't a solicitor's job. It was a legal assistance job, so you didn't need to be a solicitor. Of course, they bit her hand off. It was a little bit less money than she was on before, but because she was pivoting her career, it's a 6-month contract, she was more than happy to do it. It's enough money for her because her husband's working, they don't really need her income, which is fantastic for her, but it just meant that it gives her the opportunity to change direction. And I think that's a really sensible option to take. So if you're perhaps fed up with litigation work and you want to go somewhere else, think about doing that.
That's a really good point. And I think, I mean, I often use the expression a career horizon, having a really clear sense of where you're heading. So I don't know whether we've got any sailors amongst our webinar listeners today, but if you think about that concept of a horizon, if you're in a boat, most boats don't go literally in a straight line. If they're a sailing boat, they change direction with the wind. and you still get to where you want to be, but it's planned out and you're adjusting to the market conditions. So it goes back to making time to think, like, who am I, what do I want, how am I going to get there? And it just gives you that clarity, because otherwise you can be buffeted about, and especially a lot of people, they don't like saying no. So you end up doing things that you don't want to do and losing time and not getting closer to your career horizon. So it's really worth investing the time to think about what you want, and then you save time and hassle.
And something you mentioned earlier, Rachel, which I think is really important, which is about investing in yourself. And again, something that doesn't necessarily come naturally to people, particularly if they've been employed for a long time and they're expecting their employer to invest in them, is taking the money to invest in retraining, for example, taking the money to invest in courses. And it may not be law related courses, but if you're trying to change from one area to another, then it's a good idea to do courses. I work for CLT, and we do transitional courses for most areas of law. So if you're a criminal lawyer and you want to be a family lawyer, you can take a course. If you want to go from litigation to wills and probate, there are 2-day courses that are run that give you a certificate that says, right, you know the basics about everything. So have a think about where it is, your career horizon, and then think about how to invest in doing that. And training is usually a big part of that. And if you do set up as self-employed, then actually you can offset those costs. So training costs are a self-investment, and they're deductible. So they're a deductible expense. So it's really worth doing that.
Very good point. And if you think about what's happening in terms of retirement and pensions, so the reality is that most people are not going to stop work, either because of money or different factors, until probably 80, realistically.
Wow.
So that really, that you know, if you actually think about that concept, so we're going to spend all these years working, you might as well enjoy it more, and therefore it's worth thinking about that. What would give me more career fulfilment, more security, more stimulation? It's really about being in control of your career, rather than delegating that to somebody else, because it's so and so important to think about that. I mean, you know, we spend so many hours working in our lives. It doesn't take that long to get really clear about that. In fact, later on, I've got a coaching session with a 25-year-old who went into the law because his parents thought he should, and he hates it. So I'm helping him to think about what he does want. And you know, it doesn't take that much time, but the benefits of that are huge in terms of happiness, satisfaction, etc.
A couple of things just before we draw the webinar to a close, Rachel. You mentioned Reid Hoffman and a book. What was the name of the book that you were recommending?
Yeah, sure. A couple of books I'd really like to recommend. Reid Hoffman, so R-E-I-D, and then Hoffman, H-O-F-F-M-A-N. So he's a co-founder of LinkedIn, and he's written a number of books, but the one that I referred to is called The Startup of You, and it's a really good practical book. I know lawyers really like practical, and I'm very practical as well, so there's some really practical exercises in that. And then another book I'd really like to recommend is Lynda Gratton, L-Y-N-D-A, and the surname is G-R-A-T-T-O-N, and she wrote a book which has very much influenced my own decisions in my career, and it's all about the shift, and it's what the world of work is going to be like by 2020. I really, really recommend that you read that book, because it'll help to influence and shape your decisions so that you're in a very good, strong position. In some ways, it's quite a scary book. She predicts that we're all going to have a digital assistant to stop our heads exploding with social media and all the content out there. But she also shares how we all need to have 5 different strands, and also a mastery area, and how personal branding and marketing yourself, etc., etc., is becoming much, much more important. So just to summarise, so Reid Hoffman, The Startup of You, and Lynda Gratton, The Shift, and she's a professor at London Business School, both really worth reading.
And I've got a couple to add to that list. So Richard Susskind is S-U-S-S-K-I-N-D, and there are 2 books. One is called the The Future of the Professions. That's his most recent book, which talks about where professions are going. And Richard Susskind's last book is called Tomorrow's Lawyers. And again, it's a little bit scary because he predicts that most lawyers are going to be taken over by computer programs and AI. And it gives you a really good idea as to where he says future jobs will be created within the professions and how he sees that going. So if you are looking for the future and looking at disruptors, and technology is definitely a disruptor in most areas of law, then those two books I would recommend by Richard Susskind. Just to finish off then, Rachel, you do events with the Law Society, don't you? So you speak at events. Have you got anything coming up?
Yes, I did the first Changing Career Direction event last year, and I think that's going to be repeated in the autumn this year, date to be put in the diary. There's one coming up on the 31st of May. That is specifically the Women Lawyers Division, and that's a speed networking event. I'm hosting one of the tables, so it's basically, I think 4 different groups will go round, about 150 people are booked, and I think I'm one of 8 tables. And you just share about your career tips and answer questions, things like that. That event is completely free, and you can book on that on the Law Society events page of their website. So 31st of May, Tuesday in the evening.
That's lovely.
And lots of other plans, but that's it for now.
And people can check up, presumably you have on your website and on your LinkedIn page, lots of information about things that are coming up.
Yeah, I mean, please email me if you have any questions following this webinar.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rachel. So I'm just scrolling to the end of our slide. So you've got some information about me and, of course, information about Rachel. You've got Rachel's email address. If anybody's got any questions for Rachel, you've got her email address. If you've got questions for me, you've got my email address. Do connect with us on LinkedIn if you haven't already done so. Both of us are there, both of our businesses. And so I've got Law CPD Solutions has got a business LinkedIn account, and we usually have discussions on there. So for people who are watching this on YouTube after the event then and you want to ask a question, either email or look on the LinkedIn sites and you can ask those questions. I hope everybody has found this really useful. Thank you very much, Rachel, for giving up your lunch hour to go through this with us.
Thank you for sparing the time to tune in, everyone, and have a really good day.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Rachel. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.